Hello, everyone. This is not the news. This is a political platform. Get your news someplace else. This is about opinions and ideas. This is about talking points. This is a platform. With that being said, welcome back. I am that heathen bastard, and you will be listening to my show, which I may eventually someday in the future turn into a podcast. Maybe. Keep an eye out for that. So, today this is a rather important edition of my little show here on BitChute and also on YouTube. This is parents versus Joe Biden. This has been in the making for a while, and I wanted to broach this. I did quite a bit of research on this, and this is going to be terribly poignant. Now, I want to talk to you about the normal parent-child relationship, not only just in humanity, but nature in general, and what is natural and normal for the human animal. Now, when a child is born, it is obviously a baby. The baby is cared for by both the father and the mother. The father supports the baby and the woman mostly by consuming his energy by working in the fields or acquiring some natural resources necessary to survive, while the woman cares for the baby itself. This is normal, this is natural, this is healthy. As the baby grows, becomes juvenile, becomes that stage of life, the child is still cared for, protected. They are taught the rules, not only for their biological sex, male rules for men, female rules for women, etc., but the rules of life in general. And then as they are taught that, then they go through adolescence, and then finally adulthood, etc. All of the teaching done is therefore done in the home, in the natural setting. This is also done in animals, because human beings are animals, contrary to how some people may feel about it. Generally speaking, this is the natural order of things. Now, K through 12 is actually a fairly unnatural setup, because it takes a portion of the parent's duty and pushes it off onto someone else, on what we call a teacher. This is like a third or fourth parent almost. This is a very unnatural way of doing things. Sure, it frees up the parents for more tasks, but I think it is actually rather selfish that if you're not willing to sacrifice for your children, time to teach them, time to make them learn, that is very selfish. And instead of passing the buck on to someone else, that is honestly what K through 12 really is just passing the buck onto a state worker. And if you're worried about what that state worker might be teaching your children, subverting the values you're teaching them in the home, then I highly advise you to simply homeschool your children, is what you should be doing anyway. It is your responsibility. And no, I do not have any children of my own. That is true. But that does not change the truth of my statement. It is your child. It is your responsibility. And by definition, if you are not willing to make the sacrifice to see to your responsibility, that is selfishness. Everybody has a responsibility. Parents have a responsibility to their children. We have a responsibility to work, to feed ourselves, to take care of others, etc., etc. If you are not sacrificing to see to your responsibility, you are being selfish and irresponsible. And K through 12 is making that possible for you. Now, the thing is about K through 12 is that the system itself, not only is it unnatural, it is easy to exploit. It is heavily exploitive because you can subvert parental values taught to their children through the system, and that the state can easily facilitate that by changing the curriculum to fit a particular worldview and subvert their parents' narrative. Not only that, these schools are beginning to look more and more like prisons. Hell, when I was still in school, at least in high school, we had a fucking police officer policing the halls. A cop. You know where else you have a policeman or guards guarding the hallways? prisons. These schools are starting to look more and more like prisons. They're nicer than many prisons, but they are becoming that very much so, more and more all the time. So not only that, the K through 12 system was largely designed to produce factory workers during the Industrial Revolution. Hence why they have such a factory order and teaching kids what to think instead of how to think. Because critical thinking actually could potentially harm the factory process. And they just kept that going out of ignorance and not wanting to update or change the system to fit with the times. They did to some extent, but not enough in certain ways, in certain regards. Watering down the educational system and testing, standardized testing, has resulted in dumber children, which makes dumber adults. The dumbing down of America, which they used to talk about all the time, and which the movie Idiocracy was made about, we're kind of heading toward that already. We may well have it in Idiocracy in the future. Now, in regards to the unnatural K-12 system, I do want to talk about critical race theory and its possible presence in schools. Now, a lot of the time what people talk about in regards to critical race theory is not the actual theory itself, but rather the attitudes and talking points associated with the people who push CRT. There is a line between the theory itself and the attitudes and ideas of those who push it. Case in point, white privilege is not CRT, white guilt is not CRT, racial division is not CRT. Those are attitudes commonly held by CRT pushers. So making that line, are those attitudes present in public schools? I've heard a lot of reports and I've seen a lot of things on it. There do indeed appear to be racial equity and other anti-racist ideas being put in schools. And I've said before, anti-racism is just racism wearing a mask. Right? Because the anti-racists are pro-segregation and other similar policies just so long as it's in the name of the quote-unquote right ideology. Case in point in Evergreen College, when they demanded an entire day where black students didn't have to interact with any white students. Literally segregation. That's just one example of how anti-racism is racism wearing a mask. Suffice to say, do not confuse critical race theory with anti-racism. CRT is a tool used by anti-racists, yes. What critical race theory is the theory that race is a social construct and does not actually exist as a physical object. Race is not a real biological thing, it is just a social construct that is not literally real, it is an idea. And it is an idea that was purposely created to create a social hierarchy where people at the top of the system could oppress people below, and that it is a system of advantages and disadvantages explained by the theory and by its companion, which is called intersectionality. Now, critical race theory is grounded in the Marxist critical theory, which seeks to break down society, to criticize every little bit of society, and to have a new understanding of how that societal system works by criticizing it. By breaking it down into its base concepts and then criticizing the base concepts and trying to find its root. Critical theory is, of course, bunk, a lot of it, because it fails to really get at the heart of the matter. Because when it comes right down to it, Karl Marx was largely a pseudoscientist, but he was also a philosopher. Specifically, he was an epistemologist and an ethicist. His ethical rules and laws were fine, and his epistemology was actually fairly on point. To a degree. He, at one point, attempted to try and suggest that there was a kind of primitive socialism among apes, when in reality there was really more of like a primitive capitalism among apes. He took the idea that simply because some animals shared natural resources, that somehow amounted to a sort of primitive socialism, but that wasn't at all what was going on. But I'm getting off topic here. Suffice to say, Karl Marx's critical theory it is very shallow and doesn't really get to the heart of the matter at all and what it tries to do, which is to criticize every tiny little piece of society by breaking it down into its base concepts. It only digs as deep as it feels like it wants to, right? It's shallow, just like George Carlin. He only dug as far as he wanted to until he found what he was looking for and then abandoned the effort. And the critical theory does the exact same thing. It keeps looking until it finds what it wants. It doesn't keep going, it doesn't keep searching, it does not continue to ask questions. It just keeps going until it finds what it wants, and then it cancels the effort. So we need a new kind of critical theory to criticize critical theory. We'll call it critical theory. But still, is CRT present in schools? Perhaps not. Is anti-racism, which again is just racism wearing a mask, present in schools? Yes, because many of these teachers are part of the anti-racist ideology. And another example of anti-racism just being racism wearing a mask is Ibram X. Kendi, who is famously quoted for saying that the only answer to past discrimination is future discrimination, meaning that you respond to discrimination and racism with more of the same in the opposite direction. He's literally saying that he's a racist under the traditional definition. That is the mask that anti-racism wears, and anti-racism is in schools. Largely in colleges, but anti-racist ideas are showing up in public schools. That is not the same thing as CRT, but CRT is a tool of anti-racism. So we should apply it with a great deal of scrutiny. Now, I wanted to discuss also Joe Biden and his dangerous messaging about concerned parents. He and several others have attempted to try and portray parents concerned with what their kids are being taught as domestic terrorists. They've been saying this for a while now. They try and associate them with like QAnon and the far right. Because that's what far leftists always do. They always try and associate everyone with the far right. Even regular-ass, normal, everyday people with no stake in the culture war. Or even centrists, like center-right, like myself. Or center-left people, like, say, Tim Pool. Being portrayed as far right simply for not agreeing with their wacky far-left ideology. They're so far left that the Overton window is now no longer visible, and anyone even vaguely close to the center now looks far right to them because of how far they've moved. And the whole Democratic Party has gone along with them for the most part, with a few exceptions such as Tulsi Gabbard. Joe Biden is right there with them. He's gone fairly far left. Also, he's also got some kind of dementia. He's barely articulate. He says things like true Nana Shibata pressure and so forth. But his messaging about concerned parents is dangerous. If we start portraying parents concerned about the teaching and well-being of their children as terrorists, that is highly disruptive to the natural relationship between a parent and a child. That is degeneracy. You want to take a concerned parent worried about their kid and portray them as a terrorist, Joe Biden? What if someone did that to you with your kids when you were a parent raising a young hunter? What if they had done that to you? How would you feel about it? Parents worried about their children are not terrorists. They are not far right. You are insane, Joe Biden. This is very, very dangerous. This could potentially lead to the state taking ownership of people's children, which is a violation of their human rights. The children belong to their family, to their parents, because they are not adults yet. They have not achieved, they are alive, they are living people, but they have not yet achieved full adulthood or full personhood yet. There are still so many cognitive functions in their brain that are still developing, and they need to be guided and nurtured and matured. And that is the parents' job, not the state's. Because the parents, they created the child through their sexuality, and they care through the child by their natural instincts. That is nature's way, and the government is disrupting that. So keep an eye out in the next couple of decades for parents taking children away, for parents becoming concerned with the child's well-being. We're going to be seeing that real soon, I feel like. Now, I'm not trying to create a panic, by the way. I'm not trying to create a panic. Just keep your eyes out for it. But do not panic. Absolutely not. We do not need panic. We do not need conspiracy theories. Now, I wanted to talk to you also about the idea of civic rights, which is the idea that you have the right to do what you ought to do. You have the civic right to criticize the government. You have a civic right to own a gun to protect yourself and your family. You have a civic right to protect your information. You have a civic right to protect others. A civic right to be protected by a fair trial, etc. And why the government might want to subvert and violate these is because these rights help fight tyrants. There can be no tyranny in a nation where people have the civic right to criticize the government when they do something wrong. This is a classic tyrant move. They take your civic right away so that you can't prevent tyranny. How can you prevent tyranny if you no longer have the right to prevent tyranny? If you no longer have the responsibility or the opportunity? Let's not forget that Stalin took the guns, Mao took the guns, Hitler took the guns. The Meiji Restoration took the guns and the swords and the knives. Anytime there's a major abuse of the population, a disarmament came just prior. That is in concerning guns, but First Amendment rights were also taken. Now keep in mind that your civil right is the right to speak freely, whereas your civic right is the right to do what you ought to do, which is to criticize the government or the people in charge. And credit, I got this idea from a live stream by the YouTuber Razorfist, who I believe may be upset with me, and I am very sorry, but this idea needs to be out there and it needs to be upheld. I did not steal it from you. I heard you arguing that this should be a thing, and I simply took your argument to heart. So if you're upset with me, I'm sorry. Razor, if you're watching at all, I don't know. But yes, this is how tyrants will violate you. And this may be how Joe Biden proceeds in the future. Is the violating your rights in order to control you and your children. Speaking of the children, the school bus is here. My nephews are back. So you may hear them in the background. I'm sorry it can't be helped. Now, I want to read you the letter sent to Joe Biden by the schools in concerning to this issue. I will read you the full letter. It's a bit long. This will be a long video. And this may be the last video I've been able to do in for a while, because I'm going to be having one of my eldest nephews staying with me because he needs somewhere to go, because he's living in Seattle and his safety is at risk, because he's getting beat up, and it may be, and possibly his life may be at risk because of the beatings, and it may be because he's an Asian and there's been half Asian and there's been a lot of anti-Asian hate crimes. So, I'm concerned for his safety, so he's going to become staying with me. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to make a video in a while. So this may be the last one I do for a while. So I apologize if this is long. Please bear with me. Now, this is the NSBA letter sent on September 29th, 2021 from the National School Boards Association. Oh, and hey, here's their address in case you're interested. 1680 Duke Street, FL2 Alexandria, Virginia, I'm assuming, 22314-3493. Phone 703-838-6722. So if you want to go complain to them or go to the nsba.org. Go ahead and complain to them. I'm not calling for violence, by the way. This is not a dox. Now, this is the part that really pisses me off. The Honorable Joseph R. Biden. In what sense is that man honorable? President of the United States, the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, blah, blah, blah. All right, federal assistant to stop threats and acts of violence against public school children, public school board members, and other public school district officials and educators. So they're already suggesting that there's supposed threats from parents. I seriously doubt that very much. This is a classic tactic the far left sometimes uses, where they claim that there was death threats or a threat of violence, but when they're asked to provide proof for that threat, they can't provide it. This is very classic, you guys. This is classic. America's public schools and its education leaders are under an immediate threat. The National School Boards Association, NSBA, respectfully asks for federal law enforcement and other assistance to deal with the growing number of threats of violence and acts of intimidation occurring across the nation. Proof, please. Local school board members want to hear from their communities on important issues, and that must be at the forefront of good school board governance and promotion of free speech. However, there also must be safeguards in place to protect public schools and dedication education leaders as they do their jobs. NSBA believes immediate assistance is required to protect our students. Our students? They're not your kids. They're somebody else's kids. You're protecting the kids from their own parents. School board members and educators who are susceptible to acts of violence affecting interstate commerce because of threats to their districts, families, and personal safety. As our school boards continue coronavirus recovery operations within their respective districts, they are also preserving against other challenges that could impede this progress in a number of communities. Coupled with attacks against school board members and educators for approving policies for masks to protect the health and safety of students and school employees. Many public school officials are also facing physical threats because of propaganda purporting the false inclusion of critical race theory within classroom instruction and curricula. This propaganda continues despite the fact that critical race theory is not taught in public schools and remains a complex law school and graduate subject well beyond the scope of the K-12 class. That remains to be seen. On behalf of our state associations and the more than 90,000 school board members who govern our country's 14,000 local public school districts, educate more than 50 million school children, NSBA appreciate your leadership to end the proliferation of COVID-19 in our communities and our school districts. We also appreciate recent discussions with White House and U.S. Department of Education staff on many critical issues facing public schools, including threats school officials are receiving. Yeah, that's page 1. And we're still waiting on the proof that such threats have ever been sent, by the way. Preclusion of further threats and violence against students and educators, September 29th, 2021, page 2. In addition, we applaud your actions to restore resources to school districts that have not yet received their education stabilization funding through the project SAFE, which is called Supporting America's Families and Educators. Grant program for coronavirus recovery efforts, including the use of face masks and other precautions to help prevent COVID-19 infections among students and educators. Now we ask that the federal government investigate, intercept, and prevent the current threats and acts of violence against our public school officials through existing statutes, executive authority, and intergeneracy and intergovernmental task forces and other extraordinary measures to ensure the safety of our children, again protecting the children from their own parents, and educators to protect interstate commerce and to preserve public school infrastructure and campuses. They're not your children. They're their parents' children. Stop! While local and state law enforcement agencies are working with public school officials in several communities to prevent further disruptions to educational services and school district operations, law enforcement officials in some jurisdictions need assistance, including help with monitoring the threat levels. As these threats and acts of violence have become more prevalent during public school board meetings via documented threats transmitted through the U.S. Postal Service, through social media and other online platforms, and around personal properties, please show us the threats. NSBA respectfully asks that a joint collaboration among federal law enforcement agencies, state and local enforcement, and with public school officials be undertaken to focus on these threats. NSBA specifically solicits the expertise and resources of the U.S. Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Investigation, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Secret Service, and its National Threat Assessment Center, regarding the level of risk to public school children, educators, board members, and facilities, campuses. We also request the assistance of the U.S. Postal Inspection Service to intervene against the threatening letters and cyberbullying attacks that have been transmitted to student, school board members, district administrators, and other educators. As these acts of malice, violence, and threats against public school officials, alleged threats, have increased, the classification of these heinous actions could be the equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism, here we go, and hate crimes. As such, NSBA requested joint expedition review by the U.S. Department of Justice, Education, and Homeland Security, along with the appropriate training, coordination, investigations, and enforcement mechanisms from the FBI, including any technical assistance necessary from and state and local coordination with its National Security Branch and Counterterrorism Division, as well as any other federal agency with relevant jurisdictional authority and oversight. Additionally, NSBA requests that such review examine appropriate enforceable actions against these crimes and acts of violence under the Gun-Free School Zones Act, the Patriot Act in regards to domestic terrorism, the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, the Violent Interference with Federally Protected Rights Statute, the Conspiracy Against Rights Statute, and Executive Order to enforce all applicable federal laws for the preclusion of further threats and violence against students and educators. Page 3. They're already labeling parents as terrorists. They're literally calling upon Patriot Act and other similar laws, which, by the way, violate the Constitution in a number of ways. Largely, I believe it is the 4th or 5th Amendment. It's the 4th Amendment. The right to privacy. It has been thoroughly violated to the point where it's basically been raped by these laws, and yet they keep doing it anyway, because you can't really have authoritarianism without the 4th and 5th Amendments protecting you. Anyway, and they're already terming it as our children. They're not your children, they're their parents' children. But I digress. Protection of students and public school district personnel and any related measure. As the threats grow and news of extremist hate organizations showing up at school board meetings is being reported, this is a critical time of a proactive approach to deal with this difficult issue. What groups? What organizations? What hate groups? What hate organizations? Specify. If you can't specify, then you probably don't actually know what you're talking about. You're probably just talking out your ass. Anyway, these threats or actual acts of violence against our school districts are impacting the delivery of educational services to students and families, as many districts receive federal funds and subsidies for services to millions of students with disabilities, health screenings, and supplemental supports for disadvantaged students. Child nutrition, broadband connectivity, educator development, school safety activities, career and technical education, and more. School board meetings have been disrupted in California, Florida, Georgia, and other states because of local directives for mask coverings to protect students and educators from COVID-19. An individual was arrested in Illinois for aggravated battery and disorderly conduct during a school board meeting. During 2 separate school board meetings in Michigan, an individual yelled a Nazi salute in protest to masking requirements, and another individual prompted the board to call a recess because of opposition to critical race theory. So, there may have been some lone actors who did actually make some possibly viable threats, but many of them likely did no such thing. So, we continue, but that's probably just a lone actor, I'm sure. Preclusion of further threats and violence against student educators, September 29th, page 4. In New Jersey, Ohio, and other states, anti-mask proponents are inciting chaos during board meetings. In Virginia, an individual was arrested, another man was ticketed for trespassing, and a third person was hurt during a school board meeting. Discussion distinguishing current curricula from critical race theory and regarding equity issues in other states, including Washington, Texas, Wisconsin, Wyoming, and Tennessee. School boards have been confronted by angry mobs and forced to end meetings abruptly. A resident of Belleville who proclaimed himself as a vaccine police has called school administrators while filming himself on Facebook Live. These are probably lone actors that they're just using to try and build their narrative, which is why I encourage you to protest against schools peacefully. Do not use violence. You are feeding their narrative. Please do not. Now, other groups are posting watch lists against school boards and spreading misinformation that boards are adopting critical race theory curriculum and working to maintain online learning by haphazardly attributing it to COVID-19. In Ohio, an individual mailed a letter to a school board member labeling the return address on the envelope from a local neighborhood association and then enclosing threatening hate mail from another entity. This correspondent states that we are coming after you and all the members on the BOE Board of Education. This hate mail continues by stating you are forcing them to wear masks for no reason in this world other than control, and for that you will pay dearly. Among other incendiaries, this same threat also calls a school board member a filthy traitor, implies loss of pension funds, and labels a school board as Marxist. Earlier this month, a student in Tennessee was mocked during a board meeting for advocating masks to schools after testifying that his grandmother, who was an educator, died because of COVID-19. These threats and acts of violence are affecting our nation's democracy at the very foundational levels, causing school board members, many who are not paid, to resign immediately and or discontinue their service after their respective terms. Further, this increasing violence is a clear and present danger to civic participation in which other citizens who have been contemplating service as either an elected or appointed school board member have reconsidered their decision. NSBA believes public discussion and transparently by local school board members are important for the safety and effective operations of schools. It is vital that public discourses be encouraged in a safe and open environment in which varying viewpoints can be offered in a peaceful manner. Our children are watching the examples of the current debates, and we must encourage a positive dialogue even with different opinions. However, with such acute threats and actions that are disruptive to our students' well-being, to the safety of public school officials and personnel, and to interstate commerce, we urge the federal government's intervention against individuals or hate groups who are targeting our schools and educators. Again, what hate groups? And do you have real hard evidence? Because what I've seen so far are just videos of angry parents joining in on meetings, and the meetings are open to the public to the best of my knowledge. What hate groups? Who are they? Where are they? I want to know. The world wants to know. Now, this is a common tactic of the far left, making claims of far-right activity, death threats, danger threats, etc. And they're never able to back it up. The minute you make them provide evidence, they back out of the conversation because they know they can't. This is a classic tactic, and many of these far-left people are now becoming teachers and doctors and even military personnel. The reason why the far left is more dangerous than the far right is because the far left has institutional power. CRT and promoting CRT is a common far left tactic. You know you're far left when you promote it. It's based in far left Marxism. And we have Mark Milley promoting it. We have some other chiefs of staff promoting it. We have far leftist people in political parties. They have institutional power that the far right does not. Centrists do not support CRT. Many politically centered scientists do not support CRT. Most people on the right wing do not support CRT. It is a far left idea. So you know if they're promoting it, they have to be far left at this point. There is no two ways about it. So you got a woke general, you have another woke chief of staff. I can't remember his name at the moment, but he hangs out with Mark Milley quite a bit. You have woke politicians in the Democratic Party. They have institutional power. So if Joe Biden is going to cooperate with the far left and the Marxists and damage the relationship between parents and children and label parents as terrorists, this may be a cause to impeach Joe Biden on human rights violations or violation of some other right. That is grounds for impeachment. The president is a public servant. He is supposed to respect the population. Therefore, that may be grounds to impeach him. And if necessary, if Kamala takes over and starts doing the same, we impeach her as well. We primary all the Democratic politicians until they change their ways, and we actively keep the socialists out of the Hall of Power and get rid of the ones that are already there. The far left socialists that are already there, get rid of them, and primary the ones that are trying to get in. That is the kind of activism that I think should be seen. Non-violent, using the system as the way it was meant to be used, protecting people's rights and freedoms, and being the bigger man. Remember that when you fight on principle, no matter what they do, you always win. You win because you did the right thing. When you do the right thing, you always win. Even if you die. You die a winner. Because you did the right thing and you made the world a better place. If winning means making the world a worse place and making it more like hell, then you actually lost. We all did. Even if you're martyred, you won. You always win when you fight on principle. As to how much woke infiltration there is of the government and of culture, because they are not part of the mainstream. They are a weird fringe element of the uber far left. They are very cult-like in their ways. This is basically a political cult infiltrating culture and government. As to how far it goes, well, you have one certified woke general, one other certified woke general. You have, it's 2 chiefs of staff and a president in their back pocket. You probably got some individuals in the Democratic Party guaranteed. So you have a political party, a president, 2 chiefs of staff. That's how far it goes in the government. It is deep. As far as in culture is concerned, the wokeness, the far left wokeness, it is in Hollywood, as certified by their ideas popping up in their movies. It is in culture. It is everywhere. Street people are now espousing some woke language and talking points here and there. Certain parts of their terminology, occult terminologies, languages are being normalized. So you have to identify the language and avoid using it. The infiltration of culture and government is very deep indeed. And as regards to Mark Milley, I'm going to finish this video off with a certain demand that I would like to be met. In regards to his comments on the event on 1/6, which was carried out by a far-right organization called QAnon, which gives me the fucking creeps, because they are neo-satanic panickers. It was not about race, it was not about white supremacy. This was about their belief that there are satanic pedophile cannibals in government, and that they were going to hold the politicians accountable by taking the Capitol. This was obviously an insane event, should never have happened, absolutely. QAnon is really out there. I've even seen them on Gab promoting Michelle Remembers like it was a legitimate book, which is what started the Satanic Panic and all of the fake claims of satanic ritual abuse that ended up ruining people's lives. But for some reason, they always end up making it about race, because for them, everything is about race. And he made the comment, white rage. I am now demanding that leftists give me an actual definition for white rage, and I also demand that leftists provide a consented definition, that all of the leftists agree that that's what it means. If you can't do that, then it is meaningless jargon, and I don't want to hear it ever again. Say something meaningful, or don't say anything. With that demand being made of a proper and consented to definition of white rage, even though QAnon has nothing to do with race, that is all. Peace. Tschüss.